Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Gonzalez. I am the staff liaison for the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Welcome to the August meeting on today's date, August 4th, 2025. With that, I'll hand it off to Cynthia Palmer, who's the chair of the BAC.
Hi, thank you. My name is Cynthia Palmer, and our introductory question tonight is, what is a specific example of bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure in Arlington or surrounding jurisdictions that makes you happy and that you wish we had more of? So we'll go through the list of who's here and we can introduce ourselves and say what bike infrastructure makes us happy. And I will start, and I would say one thing is the W&OD bridge that goes over Langston Boulevard over by East Falls Church. I used to live at that very corner, um, and then they built the bridge right after we left that apartment. So, but I love riding over it. I believe it was built for the benefit of the cars so that pedestrians and pesky cyclists wouldn't get in their way of fast movement. But nonetheless, I love that bridge. So that's mine. And let's see who is here. We can go through the list. Dana is next.
Yeah, I was going to pick on the Pete Beers Bridge as well. That one was one, and kind of I don't really care why they chose to build it. The fact that they built it is a great thing. And that probably, should be perceived as the regional standard for trail crossings.
Agreed. All right, and David Patton is next.
3 for 3. I was going to choose the same bridge. I'll choose a different bridge. There's a bridge that the Park Service or DDOT, I'm not sure, built on the Rock Creek Trail in under, what's the name of that street? The bridge crossing. Anyway, very nice bridge near the zoo on the Rock Creek Trail, Rock Creek Park Trail. Very nice. I'm David Patton. I'm a transportation planner with the county. I'm liaison to the BAC, Pedestrian Committee.
Thank you. And next we have Elliot.
I can go with the bike lane on North Quincy Street in Arlington because it has bollards and little concrete barriers on the bottom. It's great. It's right outside my apartment. I get to ride on it every day, and I'm not worried about cars hitting me there, which is always wonderful.
Excellent. All right. And Elwin.
Hey, everybody. This is Alan Gonzalez, transportation planner with Arlington County DES. My favorite feature is going to sound a little boring, but I love bike racks. Given how much I bike around, mostly DC, but it's always a pain when you can't find a rack where you're going. So you have to attach to a sign or to like a pole or something. So having more bike racks in more places is helpful, not just for commercial areas, but in neighborhoods too.
Excellent. Yeah, I tried to get permission to put a bike rack in front of our home, but the county said no. So, oh well. Let me see. Eric Goodman.
Hi, I'm Eric Goodman, and I'm also the liaison to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the acting chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And so you had mentioned both what you liked as far as bicycle and pedestrian, so I'm going to make a move for the pedestrian side of things. So I really like what has been done in the county with shaving the sidewalks to make them the two sidewalks adjacent to each other to make a smooth connection between the two of them. And I would like to see more of that. I think they've done a great job with it, and I'd like to see it continued, because sidewalks are always heaving, and because of under roots and things like that. So, but smoothing those out is better for walkers and also for people who travel on wheels. So I like that. Thanks.
Good one. I was amazed when they did that. So I've never seen it done before anywhere. Lauren.
Hey y'all, I am, oops, is my camera on? I don't know why it's not. Oh, sorry. I had it off from when I was moving earlier. And now I'm in the spotlight. Anyway, I am with Bike Arlington, and I do outreach and promotions. And gosh, I'm gonna follow Eric's lead and go with a pedestrian and bicycle feature, and that would be in Falls Church when the trail has discrete lanes for biking and walking. That's just, everyone knows to stay in their lane.
Thank you. Love that too. Mike Hanna.
Get my camera on. Mike Hanna. Yeah, the two things, the separated lanes in Falls Church are great. The bridge over Langston is amazing, and not just because they did it, but it was well designed. It's wide enough. It's got a smooth approach. It feels like it was meant to be, not like a lot of times bike bridges feel like, oh, I think we can squeeze a bridge in here with a couple of 90-degree turns and we can just make it work. That they really did a great job with that. But I'd also like to point out the bus islands, the one at the top of Clarendon, just as you cross the courthouse, I think was really well done. They actually put a separate stormwater pipe under the sidewalk around the ramp going to the bus, as opposed to the ones on Wilson that are sort of parallel with that they just need to fix it because it stormwater backs up on them really badly. But it really makes it nice to not have to be playing bus tag all the way down Clarendon Boulevard by having that separation. I really appreciate that.
That is so interesting, Mike. It makes me want to have a field trip to go look at all the different bus stop arrangements and like how they're designed. And I mean, I'm sure people have done this before. I just haven't. But I find it really, really interesting. And I
Yeah.
see a hand.
It's
Eric.
Eric wants to jump in on that one, looks like.
Yeah, so there was the Vision Zero walk earlier this year, went by some of the new floating, or at least one of the new floating bus stops, and it was pretty. I think that might have been the one on Clarendon that you're talking about. It's heading towards Roslyn.
Yeah, they've got a couple, and then they built another new one further down at the, beyond Rolfe, whatever the next street is down there. But it does look like they're playing around with some different subtle design details, and it would be good to go and look and see which ones are working really well and which ones not so much. But they do make it nicer because most of going down Clarendon, you are playing bus tag the whole way until you get to that section.
All right. Well, something to think about if we want to like a bunch of us go together. That would be so interesting. And Pam.
Hi, everybody. Pam Van Hine, PAC Recording Secretary. Happy to join the BAC meeting. You have great meetings. Always a pleasure. For bike stuff, I love real protected bike lanes and real protected intersections. For pedestrians, I love perfectly designed and perfectly maintained pedestrian ramps that are ADA and ProAg compliant and actually have a landing place where you can move your wheelchair around or whatever other devices you have. And that are aligned with the crosswalks at all possible intersections. That would be my wonderful wish for the county. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Did we catch all the people on this list?
Steve is on. Steve.
Yes.
Steve-O.
Hi, Steve.
Hi. So, I would echo the comments made about the new Pete Beers Bridge. But if, the same things happened in the past and now we just take them for granted because it was so long ago, like the two bridges they built on the Mount Vernon Trail by the airport, like before those were built, like navigating the Mount Vernon Trail past the airport was like hazardous, dangerous, and now we just take them for granted because they've been there so long. We think they've always been there, and likewise now it's maybe hasn't been quite as long, but we've gotten really used to the fact that the loop now goes under 395, and you don't have to go across the bridge at Arlington over into Fairfax County or into Alexandria, I should say, and all the long way around, and you just go. Now, that's not to say that that intersection at Shirlington Road shouldn't be improved too, but that, that route underneath and a long 4 mile run there is, now it's been there long enough. We kind of take it for granted, but it's a big, big saver of time and effort.
And safety.
All right, those are mine. I can throw in a third one. Metropolitan Branch Trail, I also think is really great.
Yes. All right, wonderful. I think that's everyone. And David Patton is first on the agenda.
Thank you. Good to see you all. A small group, that's okay. I've got what I hope is kind of a fun little crowdsourcing project, let's say. I'm going to start with taking the screen, if that's okay. And I'm going to introduce, I think you can all see this. This is the county's new bicycle and pedestrian count dashboard. It's a little hard to find. It was the softest of all possible soft launches to put it out there a month or so ago. The easy shortcut to get to it is this here. It comes from the same company that provides all of our counter equipment, EcoCounter, French company. We deal with their Montreal office for the most part. So we are now stem to stern EcoCounter shop. We have all their devices, we use their software, and we're using their public-facing dashboard. And a few folks have had sort of an early look at this. It's a great improvement over the previous dashboard, I think, that was built in-house, that we used for more than a dozen years. We were ahead of the curve. We needed a way to share our data with the world, and so we had something built for us. And then after 12 or 15 years, it started to show its age. And so in the meantime, EcoCounter had developed this. Not perfect, and it doesn't work well on mobile devices. I tried this afternoon to double check. It really kind of just doesn't deliver much. But on this web-based desktop version, you can do a lot. So here's a map of the county and if you zoom in and out, it aggregates the sites or disaggregates the sites. And let's take, for example, the Clarendon bike lane near the county building on Courthouse. And not only do we see the Clarendon bike lane, we see the Wilson bike lane by Earl's across the way. So you click on the Clarendon symbol and you get this little pop-up. And it has this month's data, this year's data by month. And of course, August is only 5 days in, so it's not very many. But it also has this feature of showing photographs of the site, which is what I'm asking you to help with today. So if you look at the Clarendon site, or most of the sites, what you see are kind of boring photographs that I took doing maintenance in the field. And that's not really what we want to do. We want to show what the environment of these counters is like, what it's like where these counters are. So if it's a nice trail through a park, we want to show a nice trail through the park. If it's a bike lane on a busy road, we want to show the busy road. If it's a bike lane on a protected buffered bike lane. We want to show that. And frankly, I have not been able to get out there and take all the photographs that we could use to populate this. There's some good examples and some lesser examples. That was one of the lesser examples. I'll show you one that looks pretty good. How do we get to Bluemont? This is the Bluemont Connector Trail. You'll notice I'm not talking about the data right now. We'll talk about the data some other time. I'm talking about the photographs, the illustrations. So here's the Bluemont Connector, runs along through Bluemont Park. Click through. That's the environment. So somebody knows that if they want to go ride in the Bluemont Park, they're going to encounter a counter, but they're going to have this nice, flat, straight, family-friendly trail to do it on. That's what we're kind of aiming for. And I have to confess, there's a bit of a downside to this as well. We've had some vandalism. You all might know that the bikeometer in Roslyn at Gateway Park was vandalized last year. I don't think I have any pictures of the vandalism, but somebody took after the polycarbonate cover and smashed it. It was a $5,000 repair. So we don't know. Here it is being ready to be unveiled, the new one. And there's the new one. We don't want to attract a lot of attention to the devices themselves. This one in particular, it's an expensive thing. It's a little finicky and it costs a lot to repair it. Similarly, we have had until very recently, I'm skipping around, so sorry I'm not making anybody dizzy. Hope I'm not making anybody dizzy. We had a counter at oh, it doesn't show up here. Sorry, because it's one of the portable counters. We have a set of portable counters and somebody smashed one up, stole it, and then threw it through the window of a rental car. And so we got a phone call from the company saying, hey, one of your counters wound up in somebody's rental car, blah, 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 blah. Police report, insurance claim, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hope to get it back, hope to recover it. But we don't want to draw a lot of attention to the devices themselves. They look like technology, they're expensive. Thankfully, we've had very little vandalism over the years, but we want to just enhance this public-facing website with better illustrations of where people might find themselves. And I'll cut to the chase here and go visit our very newest site, which is a brand new counter at the trail that links the Mount Vernon Trail with the Boundary Channel Drive roundabout by Longbridge Park. And it's brand new, opened maybe a month ago. And I don't know why the counts aren't showing. And the photos here are boring as well. So I'm going to put a couple things in the chat. One is a map to the entire counter system, not the website map. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pop in a map to all the counters in the system. The map's not quite a year old, needs to be updated. Did it load? It didn't load. There it is. That should load. And I'm also going to pop in the shortcut to the public-facing dashboard site. There's also a way to navigate to it through the county's web tree, but that's hard to do. It's going to have its own home eventually. We just haven't created it yet. And if anyone would like to submit photos or want to talk with me about advice for what might need a new photo, here's how to reach me. And I hope I didn't take too much time. I hope that sounds like fun to somebody. I've talked with Dana a bit about it in the past. Dana and folks who are out there all the time, let me know if you're interested in contributing to this. I can't promise any prizes, but public adulation. How about that? And then feel free to poke around on the site on your own time and feedback any comments you have about how it's working or not working. Okay, I'm done.
Wonderful. So should the photos specifically avoid showing the counter so that people don't know, like in terms of the vandalism?
Well, I don't want to overblow the vandalism problem. It really has not been a problem. So I think, like, for example, those pictures of the Bluemont Trail, there's a post on the side of the trail. We're not putting a red arrow and saying, this is a counter post with $8,000 of equipment inside it. It's just part of the environment. That's mostly how these things are treated in my experience. There's been very, very little, knock on wood, damage to anything over time, with a couple of exceptions. So what we want to emphasize is the environment that we provide bicycle, pedestrian, trail, and bridge and bike lane access to. So photos that are more illustrative of where the place is, not like the photos I take, which are bugs and squirrels and batteries and things like that. Those are not very descriptive. So to be continued, to be refined. I wanted to open the door for participation. Anybody might like to help, that'd be great.
Two quick questions. First, not to belabor the vandalism point, but would it help to put a sticker that says like video monitored or something, you know, like a security sticker?
I don't think so. I used to,
Okay.
or we used to. I even went, there used to be a counter on the 4 Mile Run trail, the trail that Steve mentioned that passes under 395 by Shirlington. And it had its own post and a battery and a logger. And I put one of those electrical, like lightning bolt danger signs on it. Nobody ever messed with it. But it was a bit of subterfuge. I don't feel good about doing that 40 times across the county. They're not really dangerous, and I don't really want to draw more attention to them. I used to have a little tag that says, this is not a camera. This is a device that helps us maintain the trails to make them safer and better and more popular for you. And then they need to be maintained. They get rusty and so they're just sort of anonymously out there. And for the most part, they don't attract attention, and that's just fine.
Yeah. And one more quick question. What are the main uses for this data?
Well, for the data, we use it in all sorts of ways. Grant applications, safety studies, before and after studies, project justifications. For example, the bridge that everybody cited, the WNOD bridge over Langston, Washington Boulevard, or sorry, Langston and whatever it's called in Falls Church, Washington Street, is it? 29. We use the data extensively to argue from the bike and ped side that the trail traffic needed its own crossing of the road. Not only that the road traffic needed to be free of bike and pedestrian crossing, but the other way around. And it doesn't always carry the day. I'm fond of saying that what we do, we help data supported decisions. I can't really say it's data driven. Nobody's going to look at our data and say, oh, well, you've got 500,000 people on this trail. You need to have a shiny new bridge. But they'll say, hey, we're thinking about doing a bridge. What's the trail traffic like? And we'll say, we've got 500,000 people. Say, oh, yeah, well, that is a notch. It helps the conversation. So that's one of the main uses is we support capital project decisions. Grant applications always helpful. If you can go to say, we want to address this problematic intersection where there's 60,000 cars and nobody crosses there because it's too dangerous, but there's potentially, 1,000 pedestrians a day. Well, then you 60,000 times 1,000, that's 60 million possible conflicts. You start to make some headway with the math.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Sure.
Who else has questions? Anybody? We good? All right. Thank you
Great.
so much, David.
Great. I must stick around. Thanks.
Thank you. So, next up, we have a discussion on Arlington's transportation future and the master transportation plan refresh. So Mike and maybe myself will say a few words and maybe have a discussion. Mike, did you want to start? Did you want me to start?
I can start a little bit. I was hoping, actually, I've been having a little bit of computer issue. I was hoping to have some of the slides from the July meeting, but I think we can discuss it in more general anyway. So for those who've not been following along, the spring was primarily caught up with trying to develop the mission and goals, the vision and goals, I should say, that will be in the plan. And there was lots of back and forth. The bike and ped community was not particularly excited with the ones they had come up with, and we pushed to make something a little bit more transformative. They read a lot like the old goals, and then we pushed and got a few minor, very, very minor changes. Then they went to the Transportation Commission and the Planning Commission. They made them decidedly worse. Took out any mention of reducing car traffic as like something should be a goal. Then the staff sort of backed those back off to something closer to where we had started a little bit, and that's what went to the board. And Cynthia can talk about the board meeting where those were approved. So yeah, Cynthia, if you want to jump in and talk about what the discussion was like at the board meeting.
Yeah. So I went to the board meeting. I guess it's been a couple weeks ago now. Staff gave a presentation, sort of a big promotional effort to get the goals approved. The staff made a huge emphasis on the number of voices that they've heard from, the extent of the engagement. I don't know, in the hundreds, in the thousands, maybe. It was like so many people have weighed in. What was really unclear, though, is how all that engagement is actually translating the public input into the actual draft language. And that seems to be, in my mind, the disconnect or the weak link, especially since the goals keep changing. Like, if the goals were driven by these hundreds of people they've talked to, then you wouldn't think that the goals would shift so dramatically so many times in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But they have. As Mike said, they've gone from sort of mediocre to bad to vague to wishy-washy. So several people spoke out at the board meeting, wanting to be able to travel through Arlington without a car, to be able to bike and walk safely and take transit. So the public input, the handful of people who spent all those hours at the board meeting, they had good things to say. Chris Flatt was right on target, excellent as always, talking about how we need choices, like real choices, like I think that the language that they had inserted is like choices beyond using a car. Um, and he talked about how such choices are constrained by disconnected routes and super scary intersections, and how we need independence, not car dependence. Um, and so many people would prefer not to drive. That's been clear in all the public input and all the surveys. People want to walk and bike, but they don't feel safe. Um, so I had 3 minutes to talk. I used every second. I talked first about my own family that were not the most risk averse. Um, my kids grew up in competitive gymnastics and in pole vaulting. So they were doing flips on the beam and so on. And yet, what makes me really scared is when they go out on the bike, because at least flipping on the high beam, like you're not subject to random vehicular killings like you can be on the roads. And I tried to put Arlington's road safety issues in perspective. Um, I mean, and it's not just here, like throughout the country, the numbers of pedestrians and bicyclists killed by vehicles has skyrocketed over the last 15 years. And it's partly drunk driving, but also the vehicles themselves getting more dangerous, not for the occupants, but for people who walk and ride bikes. And SUVs and pickups are now 75% of new car sales, and many are twice as heavy as sedans, and they have those tall vertical front ends that are deadly to those they hit. Um, and I told them some of the statistics from the articles that Pam and I have been circulating, like over the past 3 decades, U.S. passenger vehicles have become 4 inches wider, 10 inches longer, 8 inches taller, and 1,000 pounds heavier. I also talked about the March 2025 study that we had circulated, looking at driver blind spots over the last quarter century in the top selling cars, and finding that motorists can see far less of what's in front of them today than they used to be able to. And they found that the worst in this respect were the Honda CR-V and the Chevy Suburban, which have visibility reductions of 58%. So I emphasize the goals do not keep up with the dangers, let alone strive to put Arlington into the lead among jurisdictions. They don't direct staff to create a transportation system where car travel is actually optional. So anyway, that's what I said. Chris was great. The staff and the board seemed eager to adopt the goals. That is what they did. Chris was asking again and again, that they add back in without having to depend on a car. But instead, they kept the wording they had, but they added one word to the phrase on choices. This was suggested by board member Maureen Coffey. She said that the choices should be desirable choices. So that's where we ended up. I'm not sure actually where this leaves us. The other thing I scribbled in my notes that was of interest the staff said that the plan should include no detailed design guidelines. And I believe we'll have a lot to say about that. So anyway, that is my little summary. Sorry to go on from the board meeting.
That's okay. Yeah. So, right. And now I guess we move on from there. That is a done deal. And as we've often said throughout the process, the devil's in the details. It's how it gets implemented. So a little preview, and Dana may be able to speak to this as much as because I was not at the July meeting, but Dana was. But it looks like what they're going into now is what they're called scenario planning, where they want to play around a little bit with future scenarios and seeing how those scenarios might impact the results. And so let me see if I can find, let me see if you guys can see this. I'm going to try to share screens. These are some of the slides from the July meeting. Is this coming across?
Yes.
Okay. So basically they have an existing study that projects under current conditions the change from 2019 to 2050. And some of the statistics they were looking at was, they're projecting a 30% increase in just our population, a 27% increase in employment, 33% increase in total trips, and then they project it'll be broken down as below, which is basically all types of trips increase, but transit and non-motorized walking and biking increase more than automobiles, which I guess that's good news. It's not a huge change. Automobiles going from 58% to 51% over that 30-year time period, but it is at least, we're guess heading sort of in the right direction. And I don't know, Dana, did they talk much about their methodology here? And to the extent it incorporated, some of the newer electric technologies, e-bikes and scooters and such?
They didn't really seem to have much ability to predict what the non-motorized was and where the lines are drawn between them.
Mm.
And we've consistent with our discussions, it's getting a little fuzzy between a motorcycle and an e-bike.
Right.
And I don't think and we've thought a lot more about it than they have.
Right. So, but I think the bottom line is going forward, they're going to play around with some, and I don't know what the scenarios are going to be, and I don't know if they discussed that at the meeting. They didn't have it in the slides. They were just basically trying to set the baseline here for if we sort of the do nothing option or business as usual option, I should call it, what things would look like by 2050. So that's kind of where we are. And you can get into the details here, and this is on the website if you want to look at it in more detail. But I think that's where we're going now. I think our main push is going to be one of implementation. How is this all going to get implemented? That has to do with capital expenditure. That has to do with design standards. And I'll stop sharing because otherwise I'm just going to keep playing with this and confuse the discussion. But anyway, so I think that's where we're heading from here. Now, and Cynthia, there's two other topics we might want to talk about. Well, first of all, Steve's got his hand up. So,
yeah, question on that. So they showed this sort of like expected future trips of whatever modes based on business as usual. Did they also do the well, we can change this by doing more of A, B, C and less of D, E, F? And what would that look like? Or is it just this is what it'll look like along the current pathway.
Dana?
Because truthfully, future travel patterns are driven by what you do.
Well,
It's not a passive. It's not a passive outcome. It's right.
Right.
You can change that.
I think what I inferred from what I saw was that this is basically, if we do what we're doing now and continue to do this, however they define this is what the outcome is going to be. And I think the exercise is they're going to define some alternate paths, but I didn't see that. Dana, jump in if I missed something in the discussion.
Yeah, the other thing they did was they seem to blend the trips that we all will do because we live in Arlington, where we might drive to the grocery store, and the trip from somebody who lives in Woodbridge or Fauquier County who's going into the district. They didn't seem to try to tease those out, and our ability to influence the vast majority of people on our major roads is going to be limited because they're just passing through. We're seeing that on route, with the Route 1 study, but they're just passing through, and we're not going to be able to suggest that they might want to park somewhere in Fairfax County and, take an e-bike, on into the district.
Right.
Yeah.
And they did
But
note.
we can suggest.
Go ahead.
We can suggest that they park somewhere in Arlington and take an e-bike, or not drive through Arlington.
Well, not driving through Arlington is probably pretty difficult because we are something of a choke point.
Well, it depends on where they're coming from. I mean, your examples are people coming from far enough away, but if you're coming from outside the Beltway, avoiding Arlington's easy.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Another thing they noted, though, was that most traffic studies, the way they put it, are too large a scale to pick up non-vehicular modes very well. That they tend to be regional in nature rather than local. And I didn't really understand it. I was just reading off a slide, but so that we may have a struggle there in terms of their ability to really tease out things we care about.
So I had my hand up too, but the reason was to point out that I believe that a lot of this transportation modeling, now that we have a fairly good track record of having transportation models and then comparing it to the actual transportation patterns we've seen, the modeling doesn't have a very good track record. It's a bit of a stab in the dark. And in particular, a lot of the models that at least had been used, and I believe are still endorsed by some of the major industry groups, don't include induced demand. And so I question, I'm really curious as to where this is all going and why we're spending our resources doing this modeling. If this modeling, I mean, is this modeling reliable? And if not, why are we spending our resources doing that? Versus there are some techniques that do have a better track record, which are, looking at XYZ intervention and showing a modal change because of that intervention.
Yeah, no, good points. And one of the things I think we've noted before about the process is that they tend not to share information prior to the meeting, or at least not much. So I don't know what the discussion was in the room, but it tends to be everyone gets kind of hit flat-footed. So that being said, I think if folks have those kind of comments, Jillian, if you could email them to me, and I think if I get an email to the staff before the next meeting with a series of concerns and questions that were raised by the last meeting, I don't know whether we'll get, it'll help or not, but at least we'll get that input in there, because this next meeting, we're going to have a whole different set of discussions on a different set of slides that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the slides now, and it just seems, this whole thing seems so backwards. Like performance measures should be up front, not after you've constructed the scenario, you know?
Yeah, no, I hear you. So yeah, so send me specific comments and I'll put together something from the BAC that says, hey, in response to the last meeting. And Eric's question is, when's the next meeting? It's September 11th, I believe is the date. Thursday. So, something that Cynthia raised in a concern I have, and they've said this from the beginning, they don't want to put any kind of design standards in the plan. Now their rationale is things change too quickly, design standards, technology gets out of date too quickly. So we need to have more sort of conceptual, philosophical things in the plan that then would manifest themselves in a design standard. This, to me, this raises a whole other set of issues around what we do as a BAC, and I don't want to necessarily open up that can of worms right here, right now. But since the director, when he came and spoke to us, said that he sees this as a policy body, not one that should be reviewing all the plans. And I'm wondering if we should drive for a policy around bike design standards that live outside the MPT. If they're not going to have them in the MPT, have a set of standards that get updated annually, that staff would propose. We would provide comment, input on those standards that, every intersection with significant bike ped traffic should look like this, have these features. And if you can't have these features because of geometry or some other thing that just makes them impossible, you have to go through some sort of process to get approval for that design, an exception from the design standards. To me, otherwise, we're just looking at every intersection, every redesign of a road is sort of a random design that might speak to some ASHTO standards or whatever's happening, but may not have the kind of bike ped features we want to see in it.
I think that I think we do have a model for a somewhat successful. The success is kind of waning, but a somewhat successful implementation of the master plan, and that's the Open Spaces Master Plan. They have an implementation advisory group, and so I think pushing for something like that might be a realistic goal, but also making the point that, I mean, just like the point with modeling, yes, there are traffic engineers, but the traffic engineering profession has been so focused on cars that there are some blind spots. Also, like you said, all the stuff is changing, the technology is changing, which also leads to some blind spots. So I think what is successful about a partnership with a group like ours, is to have that real world on the ground experience of, for example, the turn radius of, XYZ is too small. So let's make sure, let's make sure when we build something, we build out the turn radius so that it accounts for a bike with a trailer or a cargo bike. Let's make sure when we put in EV chargers that we put in chargers that work with cars and bikes, that kind of thing. And you can phrase that a myriad of different ways, but I think practically that's where we can be the most helpful.
You mean by pushing for a implementation group, and then through that sort of helping them develop some standards for. I mean, are you thinking the implementation group would review projects like we used to do, or they would be still more of a policy level? Here's what a design standard should look like, kind of a group.
So no to both of those things.
Okay.
The implementation group would be, because a lot of the work here, and honestly, a lot of what Arlington hasn't done is actually decided to prioritize projects that would help other modes of transportation, or within the budget cycle prioritize non-driving, right? So we always fund repaving the roads. The paving of the roads always gets its money. It never gets cut. Transit gets cut. And when we build the capital projects, we rebuild intersections all the time. But what's driving which intersection to get rebuilt is cars.
Mm.
It's, so like where does that list come from? That I think is where what the implementation committee, which needs to be way more than bikes,
Right.
but and it needs to be everyone coming together, because sometimes the answer will be to rebuild an intersection that primarily serves drivers.
Mm-hmm.
But to do, like, for example, Kirkwood and Langston Boulevard desperately needs a rebuild. It needs a rebuild primarily for drivers, because it's very unsafe to drive through there. But also, it's a crucial connection from North Arlington to the Custis Trail, from like the Lion Village and Lion Park parts of North Arlington to the Custis Trail, that you connect by going through that intersection. And so, and it's also should be important for transit, even though we keep saying transit. But, so if we had an implementation committee that had people thinking about all the different aspects of transportation, that rebuilding of that intersection would probably be a higher priority, and we would fund it sooner. It would happen sooner. And also, the way we frame the project that gets funded would be not just rebuild the intersection because of the car crashes that happen there with unfortunate regularity, but also to improve the connection to the trail.
Right.
But, so that is not like primarily the BAC, that's like implementation committee. I think what the BAC does is highlight things that are specific to bikes, problems we're hearing on the ground.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm just thinking as we're talking about this, that maybe we look towards the Vision Zero program. They're actually reaching out to us, and I think that's going to be part of this meeting tonight. But certainly, they spend a lot of time trying to fix things that were put in wrong in the first place, and maybe working through them, we can move towards a direction of getting things put in right in the first place so they don't have to be fixed.
Right. Dana?
Yeah, well, the challenge there is that there needs to be an evaluative component. The Vision Zero program has never asked the police, what are you going to do to make this happen? They've never actually done an implementation. They're doing they're doing some nice stuff, but dare I call them Band-Aids? They're slapping them on. They're saying, let's try this. And then, but there's no actual evaluative process to figure out whether it's going to work. And if you get around and everybody strokes their chin and says, well, what do you think? That's kind of stops a little shy of being a full-blown evaluation. Thanks.
Hey, Julian, did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, I actually was, before Dana actually said that, I was going to say exactly the opposite, that Vision Zero does do after action reports, and they do pilot programs with after the program evaluation. You know, we can have thoughts about exactly what they're focusing on, but they both look at, you know, before they put in at Quincy, no, sorry, at military and Nellie Custis, sorry, that left turn that's now a roundabout is a good example. Before they put in the temporary roundabout, they took a bunch of measurements and they asked some people about what they thought. They put in a temporary roundabout as a pilot project. They took more measurements and they asked more people what they thought, and that led to a permanent project because they did it, because they actually evaluated it. That compared to you know, Clarendon Circle, they rebuilt the entire, you know, Washington and Wilson and Clarendon, they rebuilt that entire intersection and did no pre and post data collection and evaluation. They just did it.
Mm.
So I think actually Vision Zero is a model, and if we have thoughts about Vision Zero doing it better, I think that's fine. But I think Vision Zero is a model of how we can look at things, you know, put some things in and evaluate how it works.
Great. And then Cynthia?
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder if we have a transparency problem or if the problem is me and like me not paying attention always because there's just too much going on right now. But sometimes I'm caught off guard by what Arlington is doing. And of course we have issues with DES. And the extent to which they are working arm in arm with Vision Zero, or maybe they are Vision Zero, I'm not sure. But somehow, like, BAC is no longer being consulted on a number of projects. And so the transparency piece, you know, again, sometimes it's me, I'm sure, but like, it seems like there would be ways that it would be helpful to systematize or institutionalize our role. But my other comment was going back to what Julian was explaining about implementation committees, and it made me wonder, like, why are we doing a new MTP at all? When, I mean, I know that they said, like, well, because it brings together, like, the bike element and all the different elements, but it seems like all they needed then was exactly what you all were talking about, having an ongoing implementation committee to make sure that all of these angles are, like, interests were being represented. So anyway, it just leaves me all more confused. Thank you.
Jillian?
So I'll say two things. One, the current master transportation plan, the entire goal of it is to not have more driving. In other words, to keep and that has been read by our own DES to say not increase the mode share of cars, but they've also read it to me and keep the mode share of cars the same, which is a problem, which is not, you know, I think we could debate whether the vision statement approved could be better, but I think it will be a huge step in the right direction just by changing and saying less traffic. Number one. Number two, all the goals in the current master transportation plan are separated by mode. And so, you know, there's goals for driving, there's goals for walking, there's goals for biking, but they don't, those goals don't talk to each other, don't make sense with each other. And except for biking, none of those goals are actually measurable with metrics and that sort of thing. So it desperately needed an update so that it's one transportation network and not all these silos, as if the silos don't work together. And then 3, the other thing it really missed was curbside. I mean, actually, I think it had a curbside element, the old one, but it's just so old and outdated that pick up, drop off is not adequately accounted for or planned for, which is one of the biggest issues that we all face, and that leads to safety issues. So personally, I think I'm all for updating the whole plan. And I just think in the update, if we can also get an implementation committee to work on like all the things we've been talking about, the capital plans and the general policies, I think we'll all be better served by it.
Great. So Cynthia, I think, I don't know how long we had in the agenda for this topic, but we probably ought to move on. I don't know where we are.
Yeah, we're close. We're like within 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, so
yeah.
if folks want to send me, like I said, comments and thoughts and emails, I'll try to consolidate and provide some feedback to the staff that kind of pushes things at least in the right direction.
One quick question: are we still trying to create a map for the transportation plan, or is that something that they don't want?
They told me that there was going to be a map at the very beginning of the process when I asked them about the maps that were in the bike element if they were going away. They said, yes, they're going away. We're going to create a consolidated map. So, and I haven't heard anyone talk about a map, and I haven't heard anybody say there wasn't going to be a map. So that is something, and I did, we had a small group that's met 2 times now. And we've sort of talked about, we're starting with the major bike corridor map that is in the bike element. We're adding to it a little bit, and I can share that where we are, probably not tonight, but we can maybe send that out and let folks look at it and give additional input. But I want to be ready. I don't know when that input's going to be requested by staff, but I want to kind of be ready with that.
So would it be helpful to do another meeting, a subgroup meeting again with this smaller group, or wait until after the September 11 meeting?
Why don't we wait until after the September meeting? Because it doesn't sound like that's going to be the next thing on the agenda anyway. I think they want to do the scenario business. So
Great. All right. Any last thoughts on this topic before we move on? We good? All right. Next up is Dana. We all got an assignment from Vision Zero, and Dana's gonna walk us through it. Thank you, Dana.
Okay, I just posted the questions Vision Zero would like to address, and kind of my concern with Vision Zero is the fact that it's not being particularly aggressive. A few bollards in an intersection or something like that, fixes an intersection, but we don't seem to be doing anything, broadly systemic. Today I took a look, for example, one of the questions is, what specific aspects should be bolstered. I've had some concern about the red light cameras. I think red light cameras will work, and Arlington's authorized about 23 of them or so, depending on how you count our population, and we have a dozen. And the last update for the red light camera page on the Vision Zero website was 2024. Interestingly enough, when you map that against the Vision Zero hotspots, places where intersections that are problematic, I looked at it today, and broke the county up into to 3 segments. In the I-66 and north, there are 38 hotspots, and it has 7 of the photo red cameras. Between Route 50 and Interstate 66, there are 55 hotspots by Vision Zero standards, with only 2 photo red cameras. And then south of Route 50, there are 57 hotspots with 3 photo red cameras. It would, it's not completely clear how the decision is made, and why we don't have the maximum number, and why we aren't being quite honestly more aggressive. So that's so the questions they're having, they're asking is, how do you think you're going to use this? And my concern is the fact that contrary to Jillian's position observation, is that we come up with a really great document, and then we don't talk about implementation. We go out there and do some things, but we don't talk about systemic implementation, like asking the police department, how are you going to do this? We create things in, that are both Vision Zero and elsewhere that are not, quite honestly, not enforceable. And then when you ask for enforcement, you get the line that we don't have staff. And if you go into it knowing that you don't have staff, you might be able to come up with a better implementation strategy if you know that you're not going to do these things. So I'm going to craft some questions, like BAC, and I'll share those with the group. As I finish refining them. We have a little bit of time. So the Vision Zero action plan is from 2021, and take a look at it and see what you think. Jillian.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. So I think I agree with a lot of your underlying sentiments. I think just the framing I don't quite agree with, but I do think there is a transparency problem in the pilot program stuff, and this is something that's bigger than just Vision Zero, actually. That the fact that the Budget Commission is actually looking at, which is Arlington does these pilot programs and then does evaluate them, at least some of them, but there's no transparency to that evaluation. They're not posted anywhere, or some of them are posted somewhere, but they're kind of hard to find. You have to kind of know what's going on. You have to be in the weeds. So that's something Zach's talking about, but I actually think from a Vision Zero standpoint, just saying, like, look, you do pilot programs, you do evaluations of pilot programs. Where do you post that? Where could someone in the public go follow up and learn about what we learned from the evaluation? So it's like a transparency problem, first and foremost. And then I agree with you that the police have not been the partners that we hoped them to be. And from the police say it is a staffing issue, and they are certainly understaffed. They prioritize their staffing in the way they prioritize their staffing. So, I think it's a good thing to point out that police are not serving the role that was envisioned for them when the current action plan was drafted. And either we've got to figure out a way to get police to actually serve that role, or we need to stop assuming they will. And like you said, build things that don't need enforcement, that don't assume enforcement.
Well, 4 years ago when we started this exercise, the police had somebody attend the meetings, but there was never any commitment to do anything, even then. I think their goal was to watch the process, and I don't believe. I'm not trying to attack them. They're, they have two needs. They need likely more staff, and they likely need greater greater assignment of priorities. And our civilian leadership of the county, should be in a position to provide priorities to the police department. And I don't believe that's happening. That's not happening.
They should, but yeah, no, they don't. They should, but they don't. And so it's, the Vision Zero program. So it's sort of like, who are we talking to right now? Like, are we talking to the Vision Zero program? In which case, you have to assume the police aren't going to do anything wrong they're doing.
And to your point, you talk about pickup and drop off. As long as pickup and drop off is never enforced, they're free parking spaces. We have a parking process that only gets about a third of the revenue because there's no enforcement. It's basically they're all fingers of the same glove.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is part of it. The other thing, the first question about what changes have we noticed, I would say that the public attitudes have greatly come around. And I'm talking about, the parents I meet, on the soccer field. The general discussion has shifted in a giant way from how annoying is it that speed limits are slow or a stop sign was there, to how great is it that there's a new crosswalk and a new stop sign and a new trail, and how can we get more of this? So this is within my own social circles, but like as far as taking notes, just to get back to Vision Zero, I do think that the messaging, at least in the circles that I run in, which is a lot of parents, has been hugely effective. And I think what's missing is actually moving faster. I think we take too long to do stuff. I think that the time between, like, just my example of military and Nellie Custis, that project took a very long time, when a lot of us have known that intersection is a problem that needed a solution much faster. And we've gotten it, but it's taken a long time. And because it's taken a long time, it costs a lot more than it needed to cost. And then, I recognize transparency adds time and cost to any project. Though I will say, as much as everybody loves the speed humps, and we've gotten some new temporary speed humps in our neighborhood, and people are like, these are awesome, but also they don't work with bikes, and how can we get the county to install them with a channel that bikes can go through? I've heard that from like a ton of my neighbors since they were installed on 15th Street. And that's one of those things where I think Arlington heard that when they did the first speed hump feedback. And I'm not sure why they didn't respect it. Like, put them in, but put them in a way that works for bikes. And they heard the first, but not the second.
To the question about transparency, the Vision Zero plan says they'll do systemic critical crash analyses. If they do them, they share them on a very close hold basis. Because those things would be great to be socialized. Broadly socialized.
No, they do them. They absolutely do them. They only do them with staff. They're not shared. When you say share with a closed hold basis, they're just not public at all.
To my point. If we want to change acceptance of Vision Zero, if we want to use Vision Zero to drive change, then the brilliance of these analyses needs to be completed and then socialized with the public.
Yeah,
so the public
I totally hear you. I think if you say, if you do them, then you're going to get the same reaction from staff that you got from me, which is, we absolutely do them. Because they do.
Okay.
They
Anybody
do
else
them. They just need to be public.
Other comments? Cynthia, you've been awfully quiet.
Yes, I have. I haven't really studied. I've only looked at page 6 to 12 of the Vision Zero 2021 report, but I don't feel like I know enough in to be tearing it apart. So I'm just absorbing. And I asked for a Cliff Notes version, and they said they didn't have one.
Eric.
Yeah, I just would say to what Cynthia said, I don't think you have to think of it from the standpoint of tearing it apart. I think you should look at it from the standpoint of, what do you aspire to see more of? What intersections are not getting looked at that should be looked at, things of that sort. I think that's what they're looking for from us.
And that's my concern about, for example, the red light cameras, the fact that, that they're slow walking the use of red light cameras, even though we all accept the fact that they work. It would be great to see the data to suggest that they work, but we all accept the fact that they work, and the fact that we have, basically half of the ones were authorized. If we think that's a way to change motorist behavior, then let's, max them out.
By the way, on the red light cameras, a few years ago, and I want to say it was 2019, the BAC actually wrote a letter. I'm pretty sure we wrote an official letter to the county saying, "Hey, we are authorized for more red light cameras. Let's put some more in." And they said, "Oh, yeah, let's start with, let's not max out our allocation, but let's start with a few, or I think they put in like a dozen."
And we have a
and
dozen.
So no, we had like 5 before that. So, but I kind of get their point that we should hold back a couple or a few, just in case, in case an intersection becomes a problem. But we can also say, hey, can you give us the data on the performance of the ones you put in, and can we put in some more? Because we think they've been good. I do think that part of it was with they at one point had said that it had to do with the speed cameras, that they were getting one vendor for everything, or looking into getting one vendor for everything. And I have no idea. Ellen may know some update there of whether that's actually a thing. But I think just coming at it in a neutral way of saying, hey, we have room to do more, let's do more, would probably be effective, because it was effective when you did it a few years ago.
Well, right now my comment is going to be basically come up with, please articulate the plan to get to the maximum number. And if that means that we have to sacrifice an intersection because of a new high priority intersection, so be it. We would, that's not wouldn't be an unusual concept. But the fact that we've been sitting at a dozen when we're authorized 22 maybe, and we haven't changed the numbers since 2024. Let's come up with a plan to crank it up. Maybe if you want to stop at 20. I don't know. 12 is not the right number.
I 100% agree with you. I just think if you come out on the attack,
okay,
you'll get more history than forward progress. Okay. If you come out asking for 23, you might get more of a debate about whether 20 or 23 is as many as we can do. Versus if we say, what are the next 8? How can we get to 20? We all agree we can do at least 20. How can we get to 20? Then we just get to more red light cameras faster.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, just where we talk about priorities again, I know one of our big priorities is down in Shirlington. Certainly this is something which hasn't been solved, and this may be something to put out there as well.
Okay, if you have any specifics that you'd like me to include in the BAC comments, shoot them to me. And obviously you're all free to put your own input in as well.
And we can certainly send you the priority list that we put together. I guess it was last November for Mr. Schwartz, with Shirlington Road as the top priority for terror in the county, urging that Arlington consider dedicated crossings, and particularly look at that intersection and a few others in the county that are particularly bad and where we have not seen progress. So we can incorporate that old letter. Unfortunately, all of what we said is still relevant. All right, should we move on? The next topic on the agenda is we're ahead of schedule, but that's great. Legislative priorities for this next submission. We have a couple different deadlines. We have an opportunity to present our priorities, I believe, by August 15th to the county. But then we also have the new legislative liaison coming to the September backpack meeting. So we can think about our priorities. We can submit something now, or we can wait another month if we want. But essentially, some of us have been thinking that it would be that we may as well submit a list of legislative priorities that are similar to what we submitted last October, unless anybody wants to make changes. So I can go through the list super fast of what we submitted last fall, if that would be helpful. And then if there are changes, that's great, that's fine. And otherwise, we were thinking of just staying the course and asking for the same legislative priorities when Arlington County interacts with the state legislators. So we had 2 lists that we submitted last fall. First were the primary backpack priorities, and those were simply the ones we thought had more chance of being enacted, and those were funding the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority and supporting regional transportation system upgrades. That was one. Funding Vision Zero and transportation safety. Number 2, providing broader authority to local cities and counties for automated traffic enforcement, including speed enforcement and red light cameras that we were just talking about. Allowing municipalities to have bike and e-bike rebate programs, or introducing a bike and e-bike rebate program statewide, and allowing bicyclists to cross streets on all pedestrian signals. Those were our primary priorities, and then we had a secondary category. Some of these are actually even higher priority, but they just don't have a chance of passing, or not much chance. So we included remove contributory negligence law in Virginia, require side underride guards on trucks statewide, allow bicyclists to ride side by side, and allow safety stops for bicyclists. In other words, allowing us to treat stop signs as yield signs. Oh, and one more, requiring intelligent speed assistance technology in new vehicles sold in Virginia. So these are devices that alert drivers when they exceed the speed limit by more than 10 miles per hour. So those were the items on our list. We wrote them up with explanations of each one and sent a letter to Mr. Schwartz. I'd be happy to make some tweaks and send the same letter from the BAC and the PAC, or we can juggle things around. And Jillian has a hand up, and I'm sure knows far more than I do about what would make sense. So Jillian, take it away.
Thanks. I actually don't have a good update on where other organizations are going to land. People seem fairly not pessimistic, but not optimistic about some of the expanding local authorities in this election, or in the next legislative session, but maybe the one after. People are more hopeful for. So in general, I support the list you have. The one thing I would add is Safe Routes to Schools funding. It's more of a national push going on, but there's a national push going on to increase Safe Routes to Schools funding. And Virginia had cut a bunch of that, and that might be an area where we could make some forward progress to restore / increase Safe Routes to Schools funding in the Commonwealth.
Would that be a primary priority, like it's actually doable, it sounds like.
I think Jillian might have dropped off for.
I just hit leave instead of mute. I'm so sorry.
So I'm just wondering if we would categorize that in the top ranks of our priority list.
I would, because I think that is the most viable out of all of them. Like, just from a practical perspective, I also think that safe routes to schools has a really can have a really big impact. And the cutting of funding was a real blow. It directly cut funding to Arlington County. So
Yeah.
if we could restore funding there, that would be good.
If you have a paragraph or a couple of sentences and want to send them my way, I will insert them in our letter happily. Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you. Who else has thoughts? I can send this old letter around also, of course, and yeah, we can always juggle the parts depending on what has any chance of flying in this political situation.
The one I was gonna bring up was the Idaho stop, or letting cyclists like roll through stop signs. Like I believe that passed the Virginia House in 2021, but didn't end up making it through the Senate in the same version. So like seems like that one is at least kind of close. But I know you listed it on there, but I don't know, just wanted to emphasize that one.
And that's one that I mean, I think it does increase safety, and yet some people get quite upset. I think they feel it makes us look like we're not law abiding or something. So
Well, that's why we got to change the law.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
like coming to a complete stop in an intersection is really rough on a bike, and then you can't start, and it's a mess. Everyone just assumes you're going to roll through anyway, so just make it legal.
This is true.
Yeah. So sorry. I know some background here. Actually, the reason that it ended up failing is the state police objected to it, and so it didn't pass the Senate because the police, after saying it might be okay, they then objected because they were worried about like turning movements and there being some just unpredictability with turning. It was kind of dumb, but they like ordered a study, and basically the Virginia Bicycling Federation has been involved in the study group, and we think VDOT is more on board now, but the administration, the Youngkin administration, is not on board. And so this is like one of those things. We don't think this is the year to push it, because we're effectively going to have the same administration. I mean, it's going to be a new administration, but it's not going to trickle down to this level of policy by the next legislative session. But in 2027, we think there's a good chance of it passing. So I hope to be able to report back something different. Like, I work with the VBS policy group on this kind of stuff. So I will let you know if anything changes, but I just wouldn't put it higher on the list because I don't think there's much practical chance of it passing. Not because it's not the right thing, and I hate that answer. Like, but that's Virginia.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, I'll write Youngkin a letter now, but not from the committee, as a personal person, but let him know what I think about it.
To be fair, I actually think the bikes can go on the walk signal is an even bigger issue for safety, because by being able to go on the walk signal, it lets people on bikes get that little extra on a leading pedestrian signal, lets people on bikes have that little extra time to get through the intersection. I think there's data out there showing that it's actually safer. And the fact that that died really irks me, even more than the Idaho stop thing. The other thing that really gets me more than the Idaho stop is the riding two abreast. There was a law that cyclists cannot ride two abreast if they are impeding traffic, which basically, if the lane is big enough to be passed within the lane and a car is coming, you're supposed to get in single file. We changed that law to allow riding two abreast all the time, and then the legislature changed it back. Really frustrating, especially because a lot of us argued that they should not change it. If they're going to change it back, they should have a carve out for kids. If you're riding with an adult and a child, they should always be able to ride two abreast. And the legislature was just like, nah, who cares? I don't know. It was one of the more disappointing losses of my advocacy career.
Yeah, the going on the walk signal is a big one. I mean, that's like something I do all the time too, just because like right turning cars just have no clue what to do, even when you're in a bike lane going obviously straight. I don't know. It kills me. Anyway.
To be fair, Alexandria has a solution to this. They just put up a sign that says bikes may go on walk signal. Still not clear to me why Arlington won't do the same thing, but they won't, and they keep acting like, well, we have other things, bigger things to worry about. And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of a big thing. Anyway.
So just a random little survey. Do any of us not go on the walk signal? I mean, I would absolutely always, I know that if there were a crash or something, I would be in trouble, but I always go on the walk signal.
So since it's legal in DC, that is the law in DC. When I'm in DC, I do. But when I'm in Virginia, I generally don't. I wait for the green. With the exception, of course, of Lynn and Langston, where I mean, the whole point is that everyone go on that walk signal, right?
Well, if you're on the sidewalk or trail, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right. In fairness, yes. If I'm waiting on the sidewalk, then I go with the walk signal. If I'm in the road, where most of the time I am, then in Virginia, I generally don't go on the walk signal.
Alrighty, any other thoughts? I can send around last year's version and we can have a little discussion online. And then in September, the plan is to meet together with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And one item on the agenda is to meet with the new liaison who's working on this state legislation. So yeah, so we can keep discussing these issues. Any other thoughts? Eric?
Yeah, I think we probably need to get better understanding if we need to fill those forms out at all by August 15th. If we really don't, then I think we should bring what we have to the meeting, to next meeting, to talk about our priorities that we already have and a few of the ones that we just mentioned here.
Yeah. I don't like filling out little boxes, and we have such a beautiful letter from this last year, so very coherent, explains all they need to know. So I was telling Ellen, I think we should just resubmit, like adjust it, update, and then resubmit what we have. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I've been told that that was just an optional thing to do, so it doesn't make sense to make actual work for more folks, you know?
All right. So, 8:44, we are ahead. That's great. Anybody have any more thoughts on legislation before we move on? No, we're good. Yay. Okay, so now we're up to BAC business and announcements. The only item that I have is that this next meeting, the backpack meeting, I believe Pam or Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we said September 10th. Is that right? Elwin maybe knows. September.
It's on
Yeah,
the back or the
yeah.
pack day. Yes.
Okay, so the usual BAC.
Yes, you can.
Was that?
Yes,
It
it's
is
the
the 10th.
10th.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, because our meeting normally is on the first Monday, and that's Labor Day in September. So we're looking at September 10th. Mark your calendars. And that is all I have in the business category. Who else has announcements?
I have a question. I don't know if it's an announcement. When is there anything being done at the county fair this year? I know we've had some presents at the county fair in the past.
Good question.
This is Lauren with Bike Arlington. So yeah, we're actually going to be inside and outside this year, just on Friday through Sunday. Inside tabling with, I think we're supposed to be next to Vision Zero. And then outside on the basketball courts, like we've been in the past, doing the electric ride experience. However, we will not be actually, we'll have bike share, and then each day we're going to have some of our vendors, some of our, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but on Saturday and Sunday, we're going to have, I think, Trek, Ballston is going to be there one day, Conti's, the Virginia Square one is going to be there on, I think, Sunday. And then Lime and Spin, I think, are on, I can't tell you which day, but that we will be there, and we'll have tents out there too. So Bike Share and Bike Arlington will have a tent on the basketball court from Friday through Sunday.
Are you looking for volunteers at all?
You know what? We were just talking about that today, and Mary's going to send something out. So yes, it's not going to be quite as demanding a volunteer role as in the past years where we've been getting people on bikes. We'll also have a bike, getting your bike on the bus bike rack to demonstrate, so, or for people to try. So yeah, look for that maybe in the next 3 to 4 days by the end of the week, I guess.
Also, Lauren, I believe I saw that the Arlington's e-bike voucher program is going to take applications soon.
Yeah, I
August
saw that
14th,
today
20.
too in the Air newsletter. I think starting the 14th. I don't have a
Yeah.
lot of details on it, but we're hoping to have some information on that to hand out at the fair if they, you know, in addition to whatever booths will already be handing information out. So, but I heard the 14th.
Yeah, and I think there's some evidence that this kind of program, even though these are all in, like, the actual program is income restricted, finding out about a program like this makes people more likely to buy an e-bike. And you know, people who buy e-bikes drastically reduce, or not drastically, but they reduce their driving. So like,
right.
Some people may say the limitations, the eligibility is very limited, and maybe it's not worth the being at the fair. It's absolutely worth being at the fair. It's absolutely worth telling people who aren't eligible about the voucher program, because it leads people to like be like, oh, maybe I should buy an e-bike.
Absolutely. And last year we had, when it was just kind of in its infancy talking about it, we had people who were interested being able to, you know, sign up on a clipboard, so we'd send them information. So we'll be talking it up for sure. And I just hope we'll also have some sort of collateral to hand out.
Okay, I just went to the website, which says that it'll be at the air table at the county fair. Just make sure that it's also at the e-bike testing thing.
Exactly, exactly. We'll steal some of their
Right.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
And sorry to hijack this. This also says that there'll be voucher sign up at the Central Library on August 27th. Just to put the worm in your ear, that might be a good opportunity for Bike Arlington to have some e-bikes for people to try. Like at the Central Library, just do a little pop-up, try an e-bike thing.
Yeah, well, I'll mention it and see what we can coordinate.
Wonderful. Thank you for raising the county fair, Eric. I totally forgot. Anything else? Any other business? Any thoughts? If not, I'm giving you 10 minutes. Enjoy it. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.